Of all the collectors in the world, only a few can claim a collection of these. Airplanes, the classic kind. Collector and pilot Kermit Weeks has a remarkable collection of over 140 planes that span 100 years of aviation technology. And unlike most planes of this distinction that never leave the protection of an airplane hangar, all of Kermit's flying machines take to the sky.
I don't collect anything that I don't intend to fly one day. So the airplanes in the collection either have flown, do fly, or will fly.
Valued at over $40 million, with some of the planes considered priceless, Kermit Weeks has assembled the world's largest private collection.
I think airplanes are kind of like people. They all have their own quirks, idiosyncrasies, qualities. You know, you have to love them all.
Kermit was drawn to the world of aviation at age 13 by the popular song Snoopy and the Red Baron. Little did he know it would change the course of his life.
A spark lit inside me, and at that point in my life, I became fascinated with aviation.
By age 17, Kermit Weeks had built his first airplane and began performing aerial acrobatics in a dangerous sport called aerobatics.
Because I was competing on my high school gymnastic team, when I was used to flipping around in the gym, when I started to learn how to fly, I immediately gravitated towards flipping around in airplanes.
Kermit's love for anything having to do with aviation took new flight when his grandfather shared his fortune from the oil business with the rest of the family. Kermit immediately started collecting airplanes.
I began with one when I was about 25 years old. It led to another, and it just kind of snowballed and started going downhill from there. And that's how the collection process began.
Many of his planes are authentic reproductions. Every effort is made to recreate the smallest detail.
We have a number of airplanes in the collection from the early period that we built from scratch, but we always try and maintain a high degree of authenticity.
The plane that first piqued his interest in aviation is now part of his collection. An exact replica of the triplane flown by the German World War I flying ace Manfred von Richthofen. Known as the Red Baron, Richthofen led a German squadron often referred to as the Flying Circus.
The Germans painted their airplanes up in very gaudy colors. That's where they came up with the phrase the Flying Circus, because they used to move around the front on trains, and the airplanes would show up in pieces, kind of like a circus would when it arrived in town.
Both World War I German aircraft in the collection utilize a unique engine.
Normally, the crankshaft goes around and is bolted to the propeller. On this particular engine, the crankshaft is fixed, the engine is bolted to the propeller, and the whole engine spins around with the propeller.
The German World War I rotary engines do not have a throttling system. This makes for an airplane that can sound unsafe.
The early ones were either full throttle on, or you would actually shut the spark off to the spark plugs. It's a very unique sounding engine. The pilot operates out with a button on the stick and a little 5-position switch on the side of the cockpit.
If pilots managed to survive their mission, they then had to face the challenge of landing the plane. No airplanes built prior to 1929 had brakes.
I ended up going off the side of the runway, and I put it up on its nose. I broke the propeller. This is a brand new propeller, so hopefully the next time I'll have better success.
With a list of aircraft that reads like an aviation who's who, Kermit's collection is a tribute to the innovation and imagination of the pioneers of flight.
I actually have major focal points within the collection, like the largest private collection of vintage World War I airplanes, the largest private collection of World War II fighter planes, the largest bomber collection in the world, the largest collection of British airplanes in the world.
Many of the aircraft serve as a reminder of historic and heroic events, like the tiny single-engine plane that Charles Lindbergh flew as the first person to make a solo non-stop flight across the Atlantic.
The original Spirit of St. Louis, of course, is at the Smithsonian Institute, and rightly so, although I'd love to have it in my collection. But we have the next best thing. We have a very authentic reproduction of the airplane with all the original size fuel tanks.
One of Lindbergh's greatest challenges was where to put the 400 gallons of fuel he would need to complete the 33.5-hour non-stop flight. To keep the plane balanced as it emptied, the tank was placed at the plane's center of gravity, right in front of the pilot's seat, blocking his vision.
So literally, Lindbergh is looking at 400 gallons of fuel when he's flying. They have two little windows on the side of the airplane, which he can look out of, and that's how you fly.
Another famous replica is a plane that was destroyed while attempting to break the world speed record in 1931, the GBZ.
It's very interesting to fly. Probably looks more like a cartoon character than any airplane that was built. And they took the biggest engine of the day and made the smallest airplane around it. Probably one of the most recognizable airplanes of the early racing period.
The historic Ford Trimotor was used to transport passengers from New York to Los Angeles in the early 1930s.
A lot of people got the first introduction safe flying when the airline's in a Ford Trimotor. A lot of the cables for the control systems are actually outside the airplane.
Amelia Earhart greeted this exact plane in the promotional film Coast to Coast in 48 Hours. That same plane also starred with Harrison Ford at the controls in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The Ford Trimotor was one of the safest planes of its day. But other planes in the collection flew for the safety and security of the world.
The airplane that I'm going to fly today is a very rare airplane. There's only 4 of these early original airplanes in the world.
Kermit's P-51C is one of the rarest original planes in his collection, valued at over $2 million. These deadly, fast, high-flying, fuel-efficient planes were named Mustangs and were flown during World War II by the Tuskegee Airmen, the first black American fighter pilots. Their reputation for protecting bombers is legendary for never having lost a bomber to enemy aircraft. This plane is painted in honor of pilot Lee Buddy Archer, the highest-scoring Tuskegee Airman. The symbols on the side of the plane represent his kills.
So steeped in history, the performance is awesome. It was a state-of-the-art fighter at the end of World War II. I mean, this thing was built for a purpose, and it's a dream and a privilege to fly something like this.
Another of Kermit's rare planes from World War II is a bomber with a notorious nickname, the Widowmaker.
It's a Martin B-26 Marauder. They only probably have 7 left on the planet. This is the only one that flies. They had a lot of training accidents in this airplane early on, but it actually had one of the best combat records of any of the medium bombers in the whole European theater for the American bomber.
The plane that used to drop 5,000-pound bombs during World War II drops a very different type of ammo today.
We take it down to an air show in Fort Lauderdale once a year. We actually drop watermelons out of it today, so still bombing.
Playing around on these planes can cost a pretty penny. With twin 2,000 horsepower engines, the aircraft consumes 160 gallons of gasoline per hour.
It's expensive, but the reality is the airplanes are so expensive. If you have to ask how much it costs in fuel, you're not in the market to buy one.
The largest airplane in Kermit's collection is actually a flying boat called the Short Sunderland.
It's the last 4-engine passenger flying boat that still flies on the planet. We brought it back across the Atlantic Ocean from England 10 years ago. It was the last crossing of a flying boat, a 4-engine flying boat over a major ocean.
Kermit was able to pilot the flying boat back to Florida, but other planes still await the journey.
Actually, a lot of the collection is not here on site. I've got airplanes stashed around the world. Ultimately, we hope to house everything here in Central Florida.
As amazing as the collection is, it was almost decimated when Hurricane Andrew struck Miami in 1992.
The hangar was completely destroyed, completely fell in on all my airplanes. A number of airplanes outside were blown over a mile away.
There was millions of dollars in damage, and most of the collection was not covered by insurance.
There was about 30 minutes of tears and utter just disbelief, really, and then there was so much work to do.
Most of the collection is now repaired. It's housed and displayed at Fantasy of Flight in Central Florida.
The collection really transcends value and ownership to me, and I really hope I can use them in a way that can touch people in a profound way.
Kermit's collection speaks for heroes in our history who never gave up, pushed their personal limits, and soared to their ultimate dreams. The B-29 Super Fortress is the biggest and most fuel-consuming plane in Kermit Wheat's collection. It consumes roughly 350 gallons per hour. Modern Marvel's private collections will return next on the History Channel.